are a couple of things. There are two schools of thought on how to handle what Tim is talking about, with other agencies' reviews. And in Spartanburg County, we at one point made everything come in. They had to meet the deadline. They got used to that. And they would start early. They would start earlier, so they would have to meet the deadline with all of their approvals. Well, that got to be a big problem with the developers because it was holding them up. They couldn't grade, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't do anything without every approval, water, sewer, everything. So we hashed everything out and figured that there were some approvals that could go on the planning commission into the staff reports that were contingencies.
Okay.
If they could be served with water, that would be a contingency. If they could be served with sewer, that would be a contingency. But our legal staff weighed in on what could or couldn't be a contingency and what had to be an upfront thing for the planning commission. The other thing about the 60 days is that, the state law says 60 days, but there can be an extension of that by mutual consent.
Oh, that's good to know.
So.
But a developer's not gonna say, you're not gonna push me to next month because I'm ready to go down. And you're not gonna hold me up because the state agency or something has not responded because of this one item that's handed there.
That's something that could become a contingency, but it would have to be a discussion.
Because I have done that on other developments, they didn't have what they needed, and I talked with them, I said, well, we're gonna have to push you to the next month because you don't have everything you need. And they agreed, and then we pushed it to the next month, because I let them know, if you don't have all this, the planning commission is probably not gonna approve this development if you don't have all the information that they require.
I'd be to hear what Mr. White back there has to say. I mean, he goes through this process and he's in attendance. I'd be curious to hear what Mr. Wesley White has to say about it.
Well, we don't have enough time for all of it, but one of the things I would challenge the county to look at is the method that Greenville uses. It's laid out and it's pretty, but it's called a subdivision advisory committee. It doesn't slow any of the process down. It actually allows a meeting like this with every one of the agencies that Tim's talking about. You have the fire department there, you have the school district representative there. Of course, they only have one school district, but they're set. The developer has to get certain documents in. Those are reviewed by staff. They're sent out to those agencies. Those agencies then all meet on that set date with the developer there. They go over things, they hash things out. They say, hey, here's the traffic study, here's our concerns. Here's our concerns with fire department access, things like that. And then the developer has a couple weeks to resubmit, and when he resubmits, that goes to the planning commission. So that all that's been hashed out before. It's just, the problem is, Greenville's been doing that for years. It's getting everybody, all those agencies that Tim talked about on board. But the way we do it right now, I'm not a big fan of backing it up any further than we already are. Like I said, it just delays things. It is a little bit difficult to get, everybody in the same room at the same time, but I think once you start the process, and it becomes the norm like Greenville's is, then I think that's probably your best route.
But just keep this in mind, if the planning commission approves a project and they cannot get all the permits that they need to move forward, that project does not move forward.
And that's the other big issue that you're correct. The planning commission, a lot of people think that you have to have all these regulatory reviews completed before the planning commission. That's not the planning commission's job. So that's why if you look at an actual approval letter, and maybe Tim can send out a recent one to everybody for looking at, there's a whole list of a dozen or so things that we've got to follow up with. But it's been discussed in previous years that it's not fair to put a developer under financial penalties, basically by requiring stuff that the planning commission then votes no on, so there's very limited what can be done before the planning commission even votes, so.
And most of the time, they have disclaimers at the end of the packet or the end of the application, that are reviewed that has that information, that they can't move forward, without those things.
The other thing is the 60 days doesn't start counting until they turn in a complete application, and Tim would make that determination if there's not days.
Well, and if you've got an issue of a report coming in delayed, the planning department and the developer can extend mutually. I don't see a problem with that. Do you see a problem with that, Mr. Davis and Mr. Sullivan?
And I don't, and I thank Mr. White for his comments, and I wanna just for the record say, what the planning commission hears is a preliminary plat. It's a preliminary, development, and so the planning commission is hearing on preliminary. And like Mr. White said, and Mr. Carty followed up, there are approvals that if they don't get, say the planning commission does approve a development, proposal, it doesn't mean it's actually gonna happen, because there's things that down the road from that decision that can stop the whole project from happening. That's one thing we gotta keep in mind, that it is a preliminary plat, it's a preliminary proposal, and there's a lot of things that have to come after. So, I have sat down with Greenville County because I work closely with them all the time, and that their subdivision, committee, or whatever you wanna call it, is a good idea, and we've kind of tossed that idea around before, of getting all the players in a room before the developer submits, to kind of, hash out any problems that may arise before the planning commission even hears it. And I think that's a good idea for us to look into having such a committee the developers can work with, and that way, when the planning commission does get the packet and does have the hearing, that there's more that's been done up front instead of after the fact.
Well, that basically leads into the vested rights. When does that start? We were having preliminary type meetings with, the developments before they got on the docket for the agenda, and that did save a lot of, misunderstanding and confusion. And the developers knew what a councilman's citizens were going to, raise in the way of objections and questions. So that gave them an opportunity to prepare and do things in a clear way. And it also, one would think, ensure a better quality project, but we don't do that now. I don't know why. The last one we heard from my district, I think, was the Anderson Lake property, and that never came before council, of course. It was just trying to find the least objectionable use for the property for the neighborhood. So, shall we say that, going back to the agenda deadline, can we get some policy information to come up with maybe before the next council meeting, and put it before council in the way of a policy change, and also require preliminary meetings before applications are on the docket? Does that make sense? And then give a firm deadline for developers to have all of their information in, and with the understanding that if necessary, if there's a snafu, maybe the deadline can be extended. What do y'all think? I mean, it's clearly.
I think it's a multifaceted process here. I think the formation of lack of better words, the subdivision committee is something we're gonna have to figure out how we wanna do that and who needs to be a part of that. And that would be an ordinance change that we would have to work on. As far as the planning commission receiving the information 2 weeks prior, I think that's just a policy change that can be made. Also, for the record, I did receive confirmation from the fire commission that, but there were some issues with, some of our 27 volunteer fire departments not knowing what was going on. And about a year ago, we had all of those 27 fire chiefs added to the planning commission docket email, and I guess they just don't take it upon themselves to look at it, I don't know. But the fire commission is now determined that once the fire marshal is notified, that he will distribute that out to the fire chiefs. So that is a little bit of change on their side that will help on the fire departments. But going back to the planning commission subcommittee, or whatever you wanna call it, I think that would have to be an ordinance change for us to create that. And that was something that Mr. Harmon and Mr. Thayer could work on and come back to us on for us to make a decision as a committee and then send the council. I think that would benefit the county as a whole to be able to navigate through the development process and assure that everything's in place before the planning commission hears it. And that way they're not wasting any time on something that's not gonna make it through the entire process.
That sounds like a good plan. What do y'all think?
Which layer are we talking about? There's a lot going on here. It
Well-
looks simple on paper, but it just got really complicated.
Well,